So how many children do you have?
I have two, a boy and a girl.
And what was Melanie like as a little girl?
Well, any mother that had Melanie as a little girl and as a big girl would have considered themselves blessed. She was absolutely wonderful. Obedient, cute, happy, wonderful child.
What was her education?
Melanie graduated from Spelman College with honors in English.
And how did she meet her husband?
They were at a meeting, a cancer meeting, and he looked across the room and he saw Melanie and he said to his partner, he said, "Do you see that girl over there?" And the guy said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to marry her." He said, "Suppose she's already married." He said, "and somebody's going to get a divorce."
And how did Melanie tell you that she was pregnant?
I told Melanie she was pregnant. Melanie had been trying to have a baby for months and years and just trying and praying to have a baby. And she was at a meeting out of town and she called me and she said, "Mom, I just had a sharp pain in my navel." And she said, "It's awful, I'm bent over." I said, "When was your last period?" And she said, "Well, since I'm not getting pregnant, I'm not keeping up with my periods." I said, "I want you to go to the drugstore and get the test and test yourself." And she went to Walmart, got the test, and she called me from the stall and said, "Mommy, I'm pregnant."
When did you first recognize that something was wrong with Melanie?
As soon as the baby was delivered. When the baby was delivered, Melanie didn't know what she was going to have. And she kept saying, "Mommy, I don't care what it is, but you know I want a little girl." As soon as the baby was delivered, she just stared at the ceiling. And Sam had been sitting next to her, and he got up and went to look at the baby, and I ran around to her and bent down. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I made a mistake." And I said, "Melanie, did you hear the doctor? You have a little girl." She said, "Yeah, but I made a mistake." I said, "Did Sam say something to you to upset you?" She said, "No." And the doctor had walked out of the room and had left the nurses in there to clean them up. And I ran out of the room and I said, I knew the doctor, and I said, "Something's wrong with Melanie." He said, "Yeah, something's wrong with Melanie. She just had a baby. She's just going through labor." I said, "No, it's something else." He said, "Well, if you think there's something else wrong with her, I'll keep her a couple of days." And I said, "Okay." But she wouldn't make eye contact with me. I thought the labor pains were so bad, I just thought maybe she couldn't handle it. And I said, "I'll give it time." Okay.
Yeah. And so what did you think it was?
I thought she had had a nervous breakdown. I called my sisters. I have wonderful sisters. And I called them. I said, "There's something wrong with Melanie." I said, "She's not herself." And they said, "Well, don't tell Sam." They said, "Just bring her home and we'll work around it."
And when did you know that things weren't changing? That she wasn't coming back to herself?
Yeah. She stopped eating. She wouldn't hold the baby. She told me the baby hated her. She told me that every time she walked by the bassinet, the baby would roll her eyes at her because she was a bad mother. And I told her that the baby didn't even know who she was. And she kind of chuckled and she said, "You can't fool me." She said, "I know." She said, "Because when you and Sam walk by, she giggles." And I thought, uh-oh.
And when did you first hear the term postpartum psychosis?
After I had taken her to the doctor over and over again, the people in the area knew that I kept saying there's something wrong, something's wrong with Melanie, because I didn't know the word. And someone gave me a book, and it was Women's Moods. And she said, "Carol, read this section. This sounds like Melanie." And I read it, and that's when I heard the word postpartum psychosis. Because I had been asking the doctors, what's wrong with her? Have you ever seen anyone act like this? And they didn't answer me.
What help did you get, Melanie?
I took her to 3 different hospitals, and they kept putting her in the mental part of the hospital. And then someone said, give her shock treatments. And they did give her shock treatment, and she said it was awful. She would never do that again. They changed her pills. They kept changing her pills. And I asked them, I said, well, doesn't it take a while for a pill to settle in? And they said, well, it doesn't matter because she's cheeking them anyway.
Tell us about the days leading up to Melanie's death.
I knew something serious was wrong with Melanie. And she asked me to put the baby up for adoption. She even named a lady in the neighborhood, someone that we barely even knew. And I just knew something was wrong. I kept asking the doctors, isn't there more that you can do for her to help her? What is going on? I was just baffled. I was scared. The neighbor next door to Melanie came over and said that Melanie had come to his house and had asked for a gun. And I was horrified because Melanie hates guns. He told me to take her seriously because he said she had a funny look in her eyes. My sister took her shopping. She was buying Christmas presents in April. And she got out of the car and ran to the railroad track. And my sister said, what are you doing? My sister said, oh my God, what are you doing here at the railroad track? And she said, I'm trying to find a schedule for Sam. He wants to go hunting. And then she started leaving the house, Sam told me, like at 2 or 3 in the morning and walking to Lake Michigan. We live 2 blocks or 3 blocks from Lake Michigan. And she started going there at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's when I knew, oh my God, I am really in trouble now.
Why did she try to get her daughter from her aunt's apartment, your sister's apartment?
Now that always baffled me because I didn't know whether she was going to do something to Summer. And my sister told her, no, Melanie, you can't have her. You're too frail. Summer is too heavy for you. You're not eating. You have to get your strength back. But she had a fixation with windows. She would come to my apartment, to my sister's apartment, and start taking the screens out of the window. And there was no help for me.
What was the last phone call she made?
The last phone call she made was to me. I got up at night. I couldn't sleep, and I went over to her house. Melanie lived across the street from me. And I rang the doorbell, and Sam, he was just sitting there in the dark. He was so disgusted. He was so sad, and she was sitting up in the bed, and she was staring off into space. And I said, Melanie, please, baby, you've got to get yourself together. And she said, I think Sam should have a new wife, and Summer should have a new mother. So then that next morning, she called me before I went to work, and she said, Mommy, if anything happens to me, I want you to rear Summer just like you reared me. She said, everything will be okay because you were a wonderful mommy. And I said, I'm on my way over there now. And she said, Sam is tired of you running over here. You were just here last night, and that's what stopped me. Because I felt embarrassed. I felt like Sam is getting tired of all of us. And she took a cab and left, and I never saw her again.
How did Melanie commit suicide?
Melanie jumped out of a window of a hotel across the street from her favorite place, Lincoln Park Zoo.
What is the one thing that you know now that you wish you had known then?
To be perfectly honest with you, I wish I had known what postpartum psychosis was. But I can tell you now that the people that were there for me to help me didn't do anything to help me. The only thing I can say is that I would have to have locked her up in my bedroom. Made sure she took her medicine, if that had helped. But when I had everything diagnosed and everything done after this, I found out the medicine that Melanie was taking was making her more psychotic. It was medicine meant for somebody that was schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic, and it was making them